Hey everybody, my name is Nick Henderson. I am a co-founder and writer and longtime podcaster over at 4Player Network, and these are my top 10 games of 2012. Hey guys, let's kick things off with number 10 on my list, which is Mass Effect 3. This game in particular garnered a lot of controversy because of the ending. I suppose BioWare did make a lot of big promises with Mass Effect 1 and 2, promising that decisions that were made throughout the series would have some kind of major effect on the way the series came to an end, and, I guess in retrospect it didn't quite pan out that way, which upset a lot of people. But I think more than anything, this game, or the series in general, embodies the saying, the journey is more important than the destination. But I think it's important that people don't overlook the impact the series as a whole has had on the industry. Even if the game didn't deliver on some of its grander promise, I think it still nailed the science fiction epic feel with the unrivaled atmosphere and universe development that I think no other game, or not many games out there, have really matched. It took 3 games, but Mass Effect 3 finally nailed the combat in the series, while not losing touch with the RPG elements that made it popular in the first place. Combat is really fast, it has a weight to it that one would expect from a modern third-person shooter, but it also, like the way the combat plays off the interactions between the biotics and the weaponry, feels really solid, and it gives the player a great sense of feedback. BioWare also went the extra mile to trim a lot of the fat away from Mass Effect 1 and 2, such as that god-awful planet scanning in favor of some more engaging and enjoyable mechanics. And when you put all that together and take into consideration the other things that Mass Effect has always done really well, such as character development and I mean, even the social side of things, the romance stuff is it's kind of shallow, but at the same time it's addicting in its own way. So when you put all that together, Mass Effect 3 does come together as a really great game, and ultimately wraps up the series, or at least this trilogy, in a way that deserves a spot on my top 10 list. Next up, at number 9, we have XCOM Enemy Unknown, a game that I didn't even finish, yet a game whose mechanical design cannot be overlooked. I have never played an XCOM game before, and I barely dabbled in the turn-based strategy genre, but I have a feeling this game may have changed all that. I love the lighter tone the game takes. It deals with human forces trying to defend the Earth against alien invaders, but at the same time, it has these moments of darkness where it instills complete terror in the player. Usually because you're losing friends left and right, and you have giant foes coming straight at you in the battlefield. I really enjoyed how Firaxis tackled the player movement throughout the battlefield. By restricting the number of actions one can take based on how far forward you move, it forces you to think about every move you take. I found this to be really innovative and incredibly satisfying in a lot of the same ways that character movement was handled in Valkyria Chronicles, which was our game of the year in 2008. I think both of these games play with the genre and the way these games control in a lot of really interesting ways. The metagame, or the home base that you revisit frequently throughout the game, is handled beautifully. It allows players to manage everything from R&D and recruit training to the delicate relationships between nations. It's brilliant, and you can easily spend just as much time in the base as you would on the battlefield. Perhaps most noticeably, though, was the ease in which the game was mapped to a controller. A game like this, which is normally best enjoyed on a PC with a mouse and keyboard, was translated beautifully onto a console. But above all that, the most important thing for me, the thing that skyrocketed XCOM up my list and onto my top 10, was the element of randomness. I failed the game twice, my team was wiped from the face of the planet twice, but because the game throws obstacles and resources at you in a really random fashion, it felt fresh every time I started over. So I guess in closing, I'll liken XCOM Enemy Unknown to a big budget action game that plays a lot like Tetris, and I'm pretty sure you can see the appeal in that. Next up on my list at number 8 is I Am Alive, a game that had a pretty rocky development cycle and was ultimately transformed from a big-budget blockbuster into a smaller-scale title and released this year on XBLA and PSN. The game tells the story of a man trying to find his way home after he is separated from his family by a catastrophic apocalyptic event. The game doesn't waste a lot of time telling the player what happens, or what happened during the event, and instead keeps the details to a minimum and instead lets the player hypothesize. I must comment on the game's bleak and oppressive atmosphere. There is a lot of brown and a lot of gray in this game, but to good effect. It actually feels necessary in this game, and ultimately serves as one of my favorite things about the game. It's bleak, it's dark, and it's not shy about that. But I actually respect that. It works in favor of this game. The gameplay itself can be boiled down to basic platforming and inventory management, but with the goal of survival always hanging above those basic mechanics, having a dramatic influence at every turn on those mechanics. Everything from running to climbing to jumping has an impact on your overall stamina level, which makes traversing the world constantly tense. Combat scenarios play out in ways that I've never experienced before in a game, because most of the time you only have one bullet in your gun, if you're lucky. And it becomes a game in which your greatest weapon is actually intimidation and not the weapons you carry on you. Taking power back in a situation involving multiple enemies involves attacking the alpha dog to intimidate the lackeys so that you can be on them and be on your way. It was truly amazing how much safer I felt in this game with just one bullet. But this game does a lot of pretty bold things and doesn't conform to the norm in any sense of the word. It's an emotional and sometimes draining experience, but that can only serve as a testament to its success. So I'll just say this. If you like survival, if you like horror, if you like adventure, play this game. It's a downloadable title, it's cheaper, and it's guaranteed to be one of the most unique experiences you've had on a console in the past year.
What's this?
Number 7, Halo 4. Here it comes. Another Halo game to make my top 10 list in the past few years. The series has really made a comeback for me. As most of you know, I didn't become a fan of the series until ODST, and now at the hands of a new developer, Halo looks to be beginning anew. Bungie is out, and 343 is now solely responsible for Microsoft's biggest franchise, and I couldn't be happier, honestly. Halo 4 is polished to high hell. Everything from the visual look of the game, aesthetic design, sound design, and plot even feel like a major step forward in the series. Perhaps the strangest thing about this was the feeling I felt stepping back into the shoes of Master Chief, a character I honestly couldn't care less about in previous installments. But somehow I felt invigorated, excited, and I even got a little bit of chills when he first woke up and spoke for the first time. So, can't explain that, but it was a cool feeling, so it must have been handled pretty well. The game brought this character to life for me and gave him some motivation by developing this really odd relationship he has with Cortana, his internal AI system. But somehow I was totally on board for it. I cared about this character who essentially wasn't even real, which I thought was a really interesting dynamic. I actually like the characters in a Halo game, finally. The combat's pretty standard Halo, but it feels smooth as butter. Halo doesn't need a lot of tweaking to be good. That combat has always been solid. 343 added additional support items to help add some additional strategy to the combat. The game ultimately succeeds in providing super intense, intricate combat scenarios. Halo 4 is a triumph and probably surprised a lot of people with its quality, and as a result deserves a spot on my list. For the first time, I am very optimistic about the future of this franchise. Coming in at number 6 on my list is The Witcher 2, and yes, this game technically did not come out this year, but it did debut on a console and secure its place as one of the best PC to console ports that I've ever played. The console release of the game was retooled and redeveloped with console play in mind, and even came with content that was exclusive to the console version. CD Projekt Red did a very admirable job of ensuring that they have a future as console developers by going the extra mile to ensure that their game was not just a lazy port. The Witcher 2 is an action RPG that is based on a series of short stories that originated in Poland in the late 80s. They've crafted a mature fantasy tale here that earns praise from me for dealing with topics such as political strife and corruption above all else. In fact, one might even say that the fantasy elements of The Witcher 2, like elves, goblins, dragons, all that crazy shit, take a backseat to some of the more modern themes. If you've played Final Fantasy XII, which was quite a departure for that series as well, you can kind of have more of an idea of the kind of themes that run throughout this game. The console version saw a few cool features that were in the PC version, such as these really cool detailed animations for meditation removed, but it was more than made up for with its fast-paced, addictive combat. The game looks and runs great on a console, minus the occasional audio glitch, which yes, is annoying. So do you like magic? Do you like swords? Do you like nudity? Well, The Witcher 2 handles these things in ways that other games simply don't do. All in all, The Witcher 2 is among the short list of RPGs that will define this generation of gaming. So yes, I'm giving it a pass. It did not come out this year technically, but this console port stands on its own and deserves a spot on my top 10 list. Coming in at number 5 is Assassin's Creed 3. Perhaps the buggiest game of the year, but a game so packed with content that it's really rather hard to stay mad for long. Assassin's Creed 3 debuted a new character who lived during the American Revolution, thus opening up a whole new chapter for the series to explore and the inevitable follow-ups that I'm sure will start coming next year. The game world is enormous and is populated with encampments, NPCs, wildlife, all working together to make this world feel really alive. Probably more alive than it ever has before. Stalking redcoats as they march through the roads outside of Boston during the snowy winter months is deliciously satisfying. I can't get enough of it. Ubisoft has tweaked the combat mechanics once again, making it even easier to chain attacks together and ultimately have you feel like a badass, which is kind of important in a game like this. But despite some glaring technical issues, Assassin's Creed 3 manages to remain fun throughout. Ubisoft even surprised everybody by including some fantastic sequences that have players controlling and battling with a ship on the high seas. In the end, Assassin's Creed 3 serves the fans of the series well. Tells an intricate and complex tale, while giving them a sandbox that is jam-packed full of secrets to find and history to unlock. So, am I a fanboy? Probably, but if you're a fan of the series, I'm convinced that there's nothing to keep you from playing this game, and it's the strongest entry yet. Just watch out for bugs, because there's a lot of them. Coming in at number 4 is Silent Hill Downpour, a controversial series to be honest, easily among my favorites though. However, the series has been struggling to find a home since it left Japan and has been bouncing around from developer to developer for years. This time, Silent Hill has found a home with Vatra Games, a studio located in the Czech Republic, and I kind of hope it sticks this time. Being a game that is so dependent on plot to keep it afloat, I was really impressed by the improvements that Vatra made to the gameplay. Combat feels better than it ever has, but at the same time doesn't rely on it too much. Vatra instead focuses on creating a moody and atmospheric world, which they do rather well. The game follows Murphy Pendleton, a convict who stumbles across Silent Hill when his prison transfer bus takes a nasty tumble down a hill on a rainy night. From there, the game explores themes that feel at home in the series and succeeds in delivering one of my favorite stories of the series. The world is relatively open, leaving the player to explore inside of buildings, back alleys, sewer tunnels, etc. Of course, the world is packed full of Easter eggs and fun additions to the universe that make this game feel right at home despite the new talent that brought it to life. It may not be the scariest game in the series, but it certainly delivers a unique and haunting atmosphere that I hope fans are willing to embrace. Almost forgot to mention, this is the first game in the series that does not feature a soundtrack from Akira Yamaoka, a personal favorite of mine, so I was a little worried at first, but Daniel Licht, the award-winning composer behind Dexter, my personal favorite series, I'm sure you know, lends his talents and knocks it out of the park, so worth a listen. Coming in at number 3 on my list is Telltale's The Walking Dead. It is difficult to talk at length about a game that is so story-driven without spoiling the shit out of it, so I'll keep this rather brief. It's been a big year for Telltale, a studio that rarely gets much in the way of mainstream recognition. But that didn't stop them from winning Game of the Year at the Spike VGAs. But based on the comic book series and broken down into 5 separate episodes, Telltale succeeded in not only making one of the best licensed games I've ever played, but made an enticing argument for the use of episodic content going forward. The Walking Dead plays like a classic point-and-click adventure game, but gives the player enough control for the game to pass as an adventure game. With that said, the key mechanic here is choice, and my god does this game give you some tough decisions. Everything from deciding who to save in a tense moment, who to feed when food supplies are running low. If it weren't for the wonderfully developed characters, these decisions wouldn't be too hard, but Telltale really knocked it out of the park in that arena too. So I'll keep it simple, like I said, because this game really is a game that should be experienced by everyone. But don't take my word for it, you should do it for Clementine. Coming in at number 2 is Dishonored, a game that is all about freedom. Set in a steampunkish world that has been ravaged by disease, you play Corvo, a bodyguard to the Empress who is brutally assassinated right in front of you. And of course the blame is placed on you, and you must set out to clear your name, and blah blah blah, and all that good stuff. But at first glance, this game seems fairly linear in structure, but it's the abilities and the mechanics that are given to the player that open the world up in ways that are not immediately apparent when you first start playing. One mechanic in particular, called Blink, allows you to move through the environment by teleporting short distances. It also opens the world up vertically, so if you can see a balcony or a vent or a window and you can reach it, you can teleport into it. This also opens up combat in a lot of really interesting ways and makes me feel like a badass in the most incredibly satisfying way. It's worth mentioning that Dishonored handles first-person swordplay better than any game that I've ever played. It's one of the few games in which the non-lethal approach to missions is just as fun and satisfying as going in guns a-blazing and taking out every fool you see. And to top it all off, Dishonored adopted a more stylized visual look that looks great and ensures that the game will stand the test of time better than most. So if you're looking for a game with style and true freedom and it's just downright fun, few games do it better than Dishonored. And here it is, my #1 game of 2012, and call me old-fashioned, but I gotta give it to Far Cry 3. Far Cry 3 succeeds by giving the player a real sense of freedom in a beautiful open-world tropical island. The story, while a little cliche, is a fun ride that provides ample scenarios to experiment with the combat and experience the key locations around the island, which is huge, by the way. Gunplay feels great, and with so many different guns to experiment and upgrade, the game never seems to lose steam, even after playing for 40+ hours. But the real fun comes from the well-designed controls that allow the player to chain stealth kills with gunplay. I managed to take out 4 enemies within 4 seconds of each other using only a knife and 1 bullet, which felt just about as awesome as it sounds. In addition to that, you can hunt wildlife, you can hang glide, you can zip line, you can burn shit with fire, you can dive off cliffs into underwater caves, and you can even do drugs. Well, I don't recommend that. Don't forget about the fully realized tropical ecosystem, though, that works throughout the game. It features weather effects and over 40 species of animals to hunt that also occasionally hunt you with the most inopportune moments, but that's part of the fun. The carrot on the string, though, is the skill trees and the item weapon upgrade system that can be enhanced by hunting animals and using their skins to increase your wallet size, etc., etc. You also earn experience points for being a basic badass in combat. Let's not forget about the multiplayer, which it's pretty standard multiplayer, but the co-op is pretty cool. It features an entirely separate storyline taking place on an entirely separate island that was developed purely for the co-op, which is pretty cool. So, I mean, it features standard multiplayer features that most games come with nowadays, but they went the extra mile and really dedicated an entire separate section of the game to those modes, which I think is really cool. But really, there's so much I could talk about with Far Cry 3 that I couldn't even begin to explain it adequately here. So, if you like to shoot things, Far Cry 3 is your best bet, and the best game I would recommend playing in 2012. And that's a wrap, guys. That's my top 10 games of 2012. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Be sure to keep your eyes on the site for future content at 4playernetwork.com. You can follow me on Twitter at NickH0630. And I'm looking forward to what 2013 has in store for us. I hope you'll join us next year. See you then.